Disclosure and transparency. What does that mean to the government? I know what it means to me, and I know the disclosure and transparency that I seek is much different than what the government wants to give. But what exactly does disclosure and transparency mean to the government? We see a lack of disclosure and transparency withheld in several areas. In crime cases, transparency about our local state leaders and law enforcement, disclosure regarding what our tax dollars go towards, military and government black budgets, and UFO and alien research, just to reference a few obvious examples. For myself, and I'm sure many others in similar positions, the idea of transparency and disclosure, as exciting as it sounds, is a strange and confusing time to be living in. We hear and we see many whistleblowers coming forward speaking about their experiences in classified government work, although there are still no real laws that fully protect these whistleblowers. There can't truly be disclosure or transparency with no protections for whistleblowers to come forward with transparency and disclosure. In my position, I've never been made to sign a non-disclosure agreement, but I've always been told I'm not allowed to speak on my situation or my experience due to safety reasons. So what about those of us who want to be transparent and disclose things that aren't in the typical whistleblower realms of topics such as government, corruption, or UFOs? Because my situation really doesn't fall into those categories. But my situation could literally be considered the pinnacle of government disclosure and transparency. What about those of us who don't want exposure? Those of us who don't want to financially benefit from our situation? Because I know I don't want to write a book, I don't want to get on podcasts, and I don't want to go on speaking tours. I simply seek transparency, disclosure, and the truth. I've done FOIA requests seeking answers. However, I was told that my requests have been acknowledged. I was told, due to the type of request for my FOIA, it was going to be directed to National Security, who would then respond to my FOIA request within 60 to 90 days. It's been years. I still have not received those requests. Others that I have spoken to had told me that due to the situation, I probably wouldn't get any answers until 50 to 70 years after the people involved are deceased. One of the people it potentially involves is still alive, and I'm 41 years old, so it doesn't look like I'll be getting any answers within my lifetime. What does a person in my situation do? I have not been made to sign an NDA. I've just been sworn to secrecy by being conditioned my whole life to be afraid to tell anyone or speak on anything. I know that the transparency and disclosure of my situation is not supposed to be public, and I'm pretty sure I know the ramifications it could have if it is disclosed. But in a way, I also feel that that's just not my burden to have to carry to the grave. What was done was a decision our government made. In my honest opinion, I don't feel it was corrupt in any way. I feel it was necessary, given the circumstances at the time, in order to keep my family safe. I'm not seeking compensation from the government. I just want the truth, and I want full disclosure regarding the situation, which I've been denied by the government. What happens if I choose to speak on it? Because how can I legally be held responsible for disclosing classified information that I've never been made to sign a non-disclosure agreement about? I don't think I was ever supposed to know what I know. However, for years I've been doing FOIA requests, so the government is very aware that I found out, even despite their efforts to keep it classified. I'm not afraid of the government retaliating against me if I disclose it. I'm afraid the government will fail to protect me from the threats that might be associated with disclosure. It wouldn't be the first time they failed in that category, and maybe that is what they are really afraid of, not being able to, or wanting to, protect me and the others involved if it's disclosed to the public. This leaves me in a very strange and confusing time during what is supposed to be the year of disclosure. In modern society, the words disclosure and transparency are often presented as if they're simple concepts. Politicians campaign on them. Agencies issue carefully worded statements about them. Media organizations build entire careers around demanding them. Yet behind the slogans and press conferences exists a more complicated reality, one built on secrecy, compartmentalization, national security doctrine, and the uncomfortable understanding that some truths were never intended to survive public scrutiny. For many Americans, disclosure is an abstract, political concept. It means declassified UFO videos, released government files, or another hearing where officials explain absolutely nothing for 3 hours while promising continued transparency moving forward. For others, like myself, disclosure is deeply personal. It is not entitlement, it's not conspiracy culture or internet speculation. It is family history. It is identity. And it's decades of unanswered questions wrapped inside silence so profound it becomes psychological conditioning. And that is where the gray area begins. This is the national security shadow. The United States government has spent generations constructing one of the most extensive secrecy infrastructures in human history. Entire careers exist within layers of compartmentalized information where individuals only know fragments of larger operations. Intelligence personnel, diplomats, military officers, contractors, covert operatives, and even the family members have historically operated inside systems where silence was not always enforced through paperwork alone, but through culture, fear, patriotism, and survival. Contrary to popular belief, not every individual that's exposed to sensitive information signs a dramatic classified document in a dimly lit room while someone slides an NDA across a steel table and says, "Welcome to the shadow government." Real life is usually less cinematic and far more psychologically complicated. Sometimes, a lot of the time, secrecy is inherited, and sometimes it's implied. Sometimes it is taught through years of subtle warnings. Don't talk about that. You don't understand the danger. People could get hurt. Some things are better left alone. And, most effectively, no one would believe you anyway. Ironically, that last one may be the government's most cost-effective security program ever devised. No funding request required. One of the most confusing aspects for individuals carrying sensitive knowledge is the legal ambiguity surrounding disclosure itself. Many assume that if no NDA was signed, no legal responsibility exists. Reality is significantly more complicated than that. In matters involving national security, legal exposure can arise from multiple areas beyond formal non-disclosure agreements. Information tied to classified operations, intelligence personnel, covert identities, diplomatic activities, or restricted programs may still fall under federal statutes regarding unauthorized disclosure, even if the individual revealing the information was never officially read into a program. This is a deeply unsettling paradox. A person may possess information they were never supposed to know, never formally authorized to possess, and never legally briefed about, yet still potentially face consequences for publicly disclosing it. So in other words, you weren't supposed to know this exists, but now that you do, please continue pretending you don't. It is a legal and ethical maze that leaves many individuals trapped between constitutional principles, moral consciousness, personal safety concerns, and national security interests. And unlike Hollywood movies There's usually no wise old intelligence officer arriving at your front door offering clarity, mentorship, and a folder stamped top secret. More often, there is just silence. Silence from agencies, silence from records offices, silence from officials who suddenly become extraordinarily interested in never returning your calls. The most psychologically difficult category of disclosure involves situations the government never expected to become known at all. There are not routine classified files awaiting eventual declassification. These are situations allegedly buried beneath decades of protective measures, sealed records, altered documentation, missing files, and compartmentalized personnel histories, or strategic denials intended not merely to delay disclosure, but to prevent it permanently. Historically, intelligence operations have occasionally required the concealment of identities, affiliations, operational relationships, relocation efforts, or protective actions involving individuals that are connected to national security matters. In rare cases, even families themselves may not fully understand the true circumstances surrounding events affecting their own lives. The emotional impact of discovering such information can be devastating, because once it's discovered, the individual carrying that knowledge enters a kind of invisible prison. A prison in the sense of they're unable to fully speak, they're unable to fully forget, and they're unable to fully prove anything, yet unable to ignore the truth they believe they uncovered. It becomes a burden existing somewhere between classified history and personal trauma. And unlike fictional spy thrillers, there is no soundtrack playing in the background while you uncover life-altering secrets through beautifully organized CIA archives. Real FOIA requests often feel more like being slowly crushed by administrative paperwork, written by people whose greatest operational skill is avoiding eye contact through email. The potential ramifications of disclosure involving intelligence personnel, diplomats, covert programs, or national security operations can extend far beyond personal consequences. If historical narratives surrounding certain individuals were proven inaccurate or not truthful, or intentionally incomplete, the effects could reshape public understanding of past operations, foreign policy decisions, intelligence activities, and even historical events themselves. The identity of a diplomat may not simply be diplomatic. The role of a government advisor may not just have been advisory. A family history may not actually belong to the family itself, but to a classified chapter of Cold War policy, counterintelligence activity, witness protection operations, covert relocation, or national security containment measures. The public often imagines disclosure as dramatic revelations about UFOs, hidden technology, or secret underground facilities. Yet some of the most explosive forms of disclosure may involve something much more human, like names and identities, and the realization that certain lives were quietly shaped by decisions made inside classified rooms decades earlier. Because ultimately, classified operations do not exist in isolation. They affect real people, real families, real children who grew up sensing something is profoundly wrong, but are never given the language or permission to understand it. One of the least discussed aspects of national security secrecy is the psychological burden carried by those that are adjacent to it. There are individuals who spent years questioning their own memories, instincts, and experiences because acknowledging the truth would force them into direct conflict with systems that are far larger than themselves. They exist in a permanent state of uncertainty. Questions I know I often ask myself is, if this isn't the truth, then why won't anyone acknowledge it? If this isn't the truth, then why was so much effort spent hiding it? And if disclosure is encouraged publicly, then why does my own truth still feel forbidden? This contradiction creates a uniquely isolating experience, particularly during modern cultural movements promoting disclosure and transparency. Individuals connected to deeply sensitive histories may feel increasingly trapped. Society celebrates whistleblowers publicly, while simultaneously maintaining systems that make genuine disclosure extraordinarily dangerous in practice. After all, transparency is often encouraged right up until it becomes inconvenient, or expensive, or historically embarrassing, or capable of triggering congressional hearings that last longer than most marriages these days. Modern disclosure efforts frequently exist within carefully managed boundaries. Certain information is released gradually, selectively, and strategically. Some truths become acceptable once they no longer threaten operational interest, geopolitical relationships, institutional credibility, or living personnel. But for the individuals that are personally connected to hidden histories, controlled disclosure can feel agonizingly incomplete. It creates a sensation of watching society approach the edge of a truth while never fully acknowledging the people whose lives were shaped by it. And that might be the strangest part of all. Living in an era where the public openly debates classified programs, intelligence operations, and unidentified phenomena on mainstream television, while individuals carrying deeply personal knowledge remain unable to openly discuss their own experiences without fear of consequences, disbelief, or unintended harm. It is a reality that feels almost absurd at times. The government may acknowledge unidentified aerial phenomena before acknowledging why your family records look like someone edited them using Cold War era scissors and a typewriter. For many individuals caught within these gray areas, the issue is no longer fame, profit, or public attention. It becomes something far simpler and far more human: the desire for truth. Not necessarily public chaos, not revenge, not compensation, just acknowledgement and truth. The desire to know that the weight they carried was real, that their experiences were not imagined, that the silence surrounding their lives had purpose, even if that purpose existed inside morally complex national security discussions made long ago. Ultimately, the greatest burden of secrecy is sometimes not just what is hidden from the public. It is what secrecy does to the people forced to live beside it. This video is a work of commentary, analysis, personal reflection, and speculative discussion based on publicly known concepts surrounding government secrecy, national security culture, disclosure movements, historical intelligence operations, and the personal, psychological impact that such environments may have on individuals and their families. The views, interpretations, theories, and opinions expressed within this video are those of the author and are presented for informational, educational, and artistic purpose only. Any reference to government agencies, intelligence operations, national security programs, diplomats, military personnel, whistleblowers, unidentified aerial phenomenon, or classified activities are discussed in a generalized and speculative context, unless otherwise supported by publicly available documentation. This video does not claim to disclose classified information, reveal operational secrets, identify covert personnel, compromise national security, or accuse any government agency or official of wrongdoing. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or deceased, specific operations, or real-world events beyond publicly known historical references may be coincidental, interpretive, or dramatized for narrative purposes. The author does not encourage the unlawful disclosure of classified material, violations of federal law, breaches of national security protocols, harassment of government personnel, or acts that could endanger individuals or ongoing operations. Viewers are encouraged to approach all subjects discussed with critical thinking, independent research, and an understanding of the complex legal and ethical boundaries surrounding secrecy, transparency, and disclosure. This video ultimately explores the emotional and historical tensions between personal truth, government secrecy, public transparency, and the human burden of carrying unanswered questions in an era increasingly defined by calls for disclosure. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.